Thank you. Good to see you guys again. Okay, Mammoth Biosciences started in 2017 with a mission to develop fast, accessible molecular diagnostics using novel CRISPR proteins. Initially focusing on CRISPR-based tests to detect DNA or RNA sequences for infectious diseases and genetic markers. Today, CRISPR is at an inflection point, with the first therapies now reaching patients, but its impact has been limited by delivery challenges that confine treatments to only a handful of diseases. So here to share what's in store for the future of CRISPR technology, in conversation with Chairman and Managing Director of Carvalho Capital, Jason Carvalho, please welcome to the stage co-founder and CEO of Mammoth Biosciences, Trevor Martin.
Welcome.
Good to be here.
Hello, everybody. We'll get into it. How are you doing today?
Good. Just got in, so
Yep.
good to be in Toronto.
Nice Toronto.
Wow.
A little cold weather today for us. Yep. You've had an amazing journey. Love to start at the beginning in terms of how did you get to this point? How did you start this? $500 million invested to date. Where did you end up starting?
Yeah, so me and my co-founders started Mammoth out of our graduate school work. So it's mostly out of Berkeley. My co-founders include Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize for her work helping to invent this CRISPR technology that we use. And then I was over at Stanford. And the genesis of the company was pretty straightforward. It was that this CRISPR technology was already, frankly, at the time, seeing a lot of promise in 2018, and we saw that despite the promise, there were still real limitations. And in particular, it was becoming clear it was going to be really tricky to get these technologies into all the different tissues of the body, especially places like brain and muscle, where when you think of genetic disease, you probably think of like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or things like that. And that means you have to get into those tissues.
So for the audience that's not familiar with the term CRISPR, what does it stand for?
Yeah, so CRISPR stands for Clustered Regulatory Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats, but there's no quiz at the end, so feel free to forget that. It's what it really stands for, though, is that there's actually this really interesting system discovered in bacteria, and it's how bacteria protect themselves against viruses. So similar to how we have an immune system, bacteria and other microorganisms have an immune system, and that was called CRISPR many, many years ago, actually originally by like a yogurt company. Oh. But the work that Jennifer did was to show that you could actually rip that system out of bacteria, and it's actually a really effective way of very easily, very repeatably targeting it to human cells to change DNA. And there's many, many genetic diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, et cetera, and it turns out CRISPR is a very, very effective way at modifying the DNA so that it has the kind of correct sequence so that you could actually permanently cure genetic diseases rather than just treating them. So you would actually come into the doctor's office, get a one-time injection, and over the next week, basically, the technology would go into the right cells, change the DNA to the correct sequence, and then you'd be, for the rest of your life, permanently, potentially, cured of the disease. So it's a very different way of thinking about healthcare.
So you have a lead program right now called MB111. The goal is to help people with that rare condition dealing with pancreatitis. Can you dive deeper into that?
Yeah, we're good at marketing and biotech,
yes,
as you can tell.
MB111.
Yeah, so the first disease we're going after is a liver-based disease. So basically, the way the technology works is you go into the doctor's office, get an injection, the technology finds its way to your liver, and then it edits the cells in the liver to basically delete this one gene that prevents you from clearing triglycerides. So if you eat like really bad foods, for example, your triglycerides build up in your body. And that means that kind of no matter what you eat or what your lifestyle is, you have very low triglycerides. So you can almost think of it in a weird way as like a vaccine for like cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting because from a technology standpoint, it's kind of crazy we can do this. So if you think of your genome as like a Word document, that means it's a Word document that has about 2 billion letters in it. And they're very simple letters. It's all A, T, C's, and G's. But what the CRISPR technology does is it goes into that Word document of 2 billion letters, finds a single sentence basically that's like less than 1,000 letters, changes one specific part of that, and then goes away. So technologically, it's pretty crazy. And then two, it's a really great example of something where there's both a rare population, so there's people that have really, really high triglycerides kind of no matter what they eat. It's really tough to manage, and they desperately need a solution for their genetic disease. But then more generally, I think, especially in the Western world, high triglycerides are extremely common, and many, many people, hundreds of thousands of people die every year from cardiometabolic issues. So what if we could basically lower the amount of people that have these issues by like 10, 20% with a single injection? That would transform healthcare more generally.
Mm-hmm. The field is quite competitive. You've raised over 500 million to date. You've done an exceptional job of partnering. What is the next stage of the company looking like, and how are you dealing with competition related to the CRISPR platform?
Yeah, so I think what's really exciting is that there are other companies in the CRISPR space, including public ones. And I think one of the really great things is that they've actually been able to blaze a track both in terms of helping to show the technology works, but also in terms of regulatory, because this is a very different way of thinking about healthcare. This is permanent change to the genome, and it's also a different way of thinking about paying for healthcare. It's a single one-time treatment. Those companies are working on a small subset of diseases that Cas9 can actually get to. So we just don't work on this typically. Yeah. And we're more focused on looking at things where either those companies have not done it, or the vast majority of disease in the body that's in the brain and muscle and these other tissues, where you have to have these novel CRISPR systems that we've built at Mammoth to actually be able to tackle it.
Was that how you made a decision on the specific disease you started off with, or how did you go about making that decision on what to target?
Yeah, I think this is a good commentary on like deep tech startups in general, and it's an interesting difference with like SaaS companies or software. In software, you kind of know that you can build it. No one questions if you can build the Uber app, right? Like, of course, maybe they did a while ago, not anymore. But everyone wonders, does anyone want it, right? Like you really wonder about demand and like, is there customers? And in deep tech in general and healthcare in particular, it definitely is a bit flipped. If you can cure Alzheimer's, there's probably a market, right? I don't think anyone's going to question that. You can figure out how to pay for it, other things, but you'll probably figure something out, right? The question is, can you do it? Who knows, right? Big science problem. And that means that for deep tech, a lot more of the diligence and how you even think about targets is like, do I believe I can do it? And then I have to go convince others, but I have to convince myself first. So I think there's two elements. One, which is unique to deep tech, is like, can I do it? Can I actually tackle this disease? And I think that one is the unique one. But the second one, I think, does get neglected in deep tech startups, and that is that there is competition. Yeah. There are other deep tech startups out there, maybe even working on similar things. So you do have to think about, okay, if Mammoth or whatever my company is didn't exist, like, would there be other companies that I think could do this? And we think about both of those things in parallel. Yeah.
The trends of biotech and synthetic biology are kind of evolving over the next decade. What is your vivid vision for Mammoth over the next decade?
Yeah, so I think the sad reality is most biotech companies build like 0 drugs. That's definitely the median number of drugs biotech builds. I think it's probably true for deep tech generally, like the median number of products is 0. And I don't think that's like a bad thing. I think that's actually maybe the optimal number. You want to be taking so many shots on goal for these exciting things that maybe that's a good number. But as a company, we want to be the exception. And I think what's exciting about technologies like CRISPR is, unlike traditional drug development, where building your first drug is really hard, and then building your second drug is just as hard, and building your third drug is just as hard, and that goes into health economics and how the whole system has some struggles. CRISPR is one of the first times where actually building the first drug is the hardest, and then you just make small tweaks to it. You just say, instead of going to this location in that big Word document, go to this one or this one or this one. It's very easy to do. You can actually build the second drug 10x faster, the third drug 10x faster, fourth one 10x faster. So our goal is not just to build one drug, but to build many drugs. And that's in a world where most startups build 0. But that's very much our vision over the next 10 years.
And we were talking backstage earlier about the differences of building, again, a SaaS company versus a deep tech biotech company. Can you walk the audience through what that journey is normally like? We're kind of talking about that 10-year journey, IPO, and so forth, and that template that's kind of been written and kind of how you're following that roadmap. And then as a unicorn company, the pressures that come along with running said company.
Oh man, there's not many pressures though. Okay. Yeah, I think in terms of kind of building the company, especially in the deep tech space, I think it's more important than anywhere else to have very long-term investors because these are long-term plays. And even when you start thinking about the public markets and going out for IPO, for a typical like SaaS company or software company, that's like a liquidity event. Like everyone gets paid. For a deep tech company, there may be some of that, but that's actually a real financing event. Like you still probably are not making money. The typical time that a biotech company IPOs is around when they're kind of just into human trials. So maybe they're collecting their first rounds of like human data. And that means you still might be 5 years from actually getting that product approved and actually generating recurring revenue. And that might be massive revenue, many, many billions of dollars, but still a long ways off. So even when you're on the public markets, actually, and this is something where a lot of entrepreneurs get frustrated, you have to find public investors that are long-term and aren't just cycling in and out of your stock. So I think deep tech and biotech in particular, more than any industry, you really have to find true believers that are in it for the true long term. And I think that that's like your number one goal as an entrepreneur in the space.
So we move into maybe talk a little bit about leadership here. As a CEO in a high risk, high reward field, what's keeping you motivated right now?
Yeah, I think one of the nice things about biotech, and we were talking about this a bit, is for tech companies, and I don't mean this like pejoratively, but a lot of them have to like twist themselves into pretzels trying to come up with like a mission. And I think some of them actually do a really good job, like Stripe or something, like the GDP of the internet. I love that, right? But I think a lot of companies really struggle with it. Whereas in biotech, I think one of the advantages we have, there's a lot of disadvantages, is that it's so motivating.
Yeah.
Like if we succeed, I can look at a patient in the eye and say, you will be cured of this disease and actually live a much longer life. I don't think most startups can say that, right? And I think we take that for granted in biotech a lot, but I think one thing we've tried to do as the company has matured as well is bring a lot more of those patient stories internally. And like, I think there's a misperception in the biotech industry generally that, oh, like researchers don't necessarily care about the clinical side. And like, but I find personally, and I think also within the company, even people doing the most basic of research in biotech are incredibly inspired by the idea that they could actually meet and shake the hand of the person that will take that drug. So I think that just makes it's almost playing on easy mode in my opinion.
And just on the culture side, the people side, what's recruitment like, organizational design, you're building this type of company? Are you recruiting from local academic institutions? Are you recruiting based on capabilities? Are you recruiting on long-term experience in the field and so forth?
Yeah, it definitely takes all stripes, but I think a classic way biotechs are thought of is that when they start, they're super academic, and then as you kind of mature and start going into the clinic and dosing humans, that you get more kind of seasoned drug developers with gray hair. Honestly, a lot of that's true. But I think the key for building a true long-term company, and that's our aim at Mammoth, is to build a company that lasts for the next, at least 50, 100 years, builds many, many drugs, is that you have to create a culture for those people to coexist. And for the gray-haired seasoned drug developer that's got 5 drugs approved to both understand and really enjoy working with the RA who's right out of college who, this is their first job. So I think we spend a lot of time thinking about that, and it goes back to like the patient interaction. I think everyone can be inspired by that. It goes back to everyone understanding the importance and just being very transparent about like, hey, the next huge milestone for the company is getting this drugs into humans and having great data. And that is going to allow us to raise additional money to fund the basic research for the next drug that's coming along. And I think often maybe that's just like obvious to leadership, but these things are not talked about at the level I think they should be talked about in biotech companies, because I think you have to have both of those together to build a long-term company. I think another scourge on biotech is that a lot of companies, well, not scourge, I think it works for a lot of companies, is that most companies are not built for the long term. Most biotechs are built to be sold to pharma within like 5 years. And that's probably the right method for a lot of like small molecules, but when you have a technology like CRISPR where the second, the third drug, the fourth drug are actually easier, I think actually it's irresponsible not to think about the long term and trying to build something.
And we talked a bit in the back about tissues and kind of where you're going to go. Can you walk the audience through that focus, muscle, brain, et cetera?
Yeah, so we're starting in the liver. For various reasons, the liver is kind of, quote unquote, the easiest in vivo tissue to go after. Everything's hard, but it's the easiest of the set. And then muscle is probably next. We already have some great data we've published on muscle editing. And then brain is kind of the final frontier where a lot of the diseases that we're all familiar with is primarily existing. So we see it as kind of like staggered de-risking, especially in deep tech where you're working on really hard problems, there's a strategy where you just kind of go directly for the hardest of the hard problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a little bit dependent on financing environment. If there's kind of unlimited money, do it. But if there's more constrained financing environment like biotech's been in for the last like 3 or 4 years, you're already working on hard stuff. And as long as you think you're differentiated and meeting unmet patient need, try and do the thing that you are most likely to be able to do.
We're closing up here. I have to talk about AI, obviously. Maybe you can start with the impact on that. And then love to close out, we were talking in the background of the requirement for where we are at as a species. Every single day we turn on the news, we see a lot of negativity, a lot of potential not opportunity for the future of our civilization. Love to end off on the new frontier and what that looks like for humanity and how you are playing a vital role in that.
Yeah, no, I think in general, it's actually funny. I actually was trained in graduate school on, well, we called it machine learning at the time, but worked on the early LLMs. So it's really amazing to see how far they've come since then. Back then, like it really was iPhone autocomplete. So
nice.
A huge progress in the field. And I think a lot of the focus on AI for biotech has been on the kind of drug discovery side. And we use it to generate like new forms of proteins. And it's incredibly useful. And there's a ton of application there. But actually, personally, what I'm most excited about on that front is very much actually downstream. If you look at the development of a drug, maybe you spend like $20 million trying to do the preclinical work, figure out what the drug is. You spend $800 million on the clinical trial. So if we're talking, and that's the vast majority of the time. So you might spend 2 years preclinically, you might spend 7 years in the clinic. So that's the vast majority of the time. So I think that there's a lot of really exciting applications of AI on that 800 million bucket that are like, frankly, kind of less sexy, but I think could be transformative for healthcare. And in terms of transformative for healthcare, on the second part of your question, I think moving towards more kind of common disease. So for example, people always love to talk about like superpowers with CRISPR, right? There's some kind of cool ones, but my personal favorites are things like short sleep. So there's actually people that walk among us, you might be one of them, probably people in the audience, who only need like 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. People love longevity, right? But I think the best longevity drug will be enabling people to double the amount of time that they're awake, right? So what if Mammoth could edit you so that you have that short sleeper mutation? Or let's take GLP-1s like Wegovy, Ozempic. I think that one thing people don't realize is that actually Wegovy and Ozempic have a similar revenue ramp and revenue run rate to OpenAI. Everyone loves OpenAI, but I don't think people realize there are $1 billion biotech companies that are waiting to be built. And the wrong lesson to take from Wegovy and Ozempic and the obesity market is, everyone should focus on building obesity drugs. No, obesity just happens to be the first of these giant markets. I think there's many others, whether it's like hair loss or sleep, or you can think of a million things, or like protecting humans from radiation as Elon sends us all to space, right? But I think that's a lesson that we've really taken to heart at Mammoth, and I think we really are also looking to pioneer this forefront of like, how do we move from treating rare genetic disease to not even common genetic disease, but just living in a world where your genetics don't determine your future, right? Like, why do you have to kind of accept the fate of whatever genes you had when you were born? Why can't you change that if you want? And I think that's a very exciting future. And of course, it'll start with genetic diseases and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's of the world. But I think that's a very exciting world to live in, where you can actually kind of break out of your genetic fate itself.
And I think people, that's it, we're done. Perfect, right on time. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Trevor, a pleasure. Thanks so much.